Okay, I'm sitting here and I'm listening to the news and I'm hearing the talk. How in Wisconsin, we got people during the day peacefully protesting the shooting of Blake. And then we got children at night, idiotic children at night, coming out and rioting. Like a bunch of 2-year-old children. And then we've got officers coming out, and instead of de-escalating this situation, they're just adding flame to the fire. Excuse me, please, thank you. Now let's break down the situation, the whole situation from start to finish. We got 2 adult women acting like 2-year-olds, having a fight out in the yard over their Barbie doll. So we have a gentleman who comes in, like an adult, and breaks up the fight. Then we got 2 officers who come in there like a couple of 2-year-olds who take and make assumptions right off from the start and escalate the problem again. And then we end up with an unarmed man who's paralyzed for life. Now we got a bunch of people out in Wisconsin who's protesting it. Lord knows you need to. You need to come to awareness of what's going on. But then we got a bunch of 2-year-olds coming out at night, throwing off firecrackers and burning shit and vandalizing shit, drawing away from what the actual thing that is going on is happening. Because now this thing is just coming and turning around and becoming a story about the riots and not about what actually happened. We got officers on one side, and there's good and bad officers who escalate the bullshit instead of de-escalate the bullshit, and who could give a shit less to get to know the citizens that they have to look after. You're human. Get to know the other humans out there. You're no better than they are. Get to realizing that. We've got officers out there that when they hear things like some guy call a black man a nigger, or a Latino man a beaner, or Oriental man a wop, they just ignore it. That's nothing. He don't mean nothing about it. Bullshit! An officer using that language has something set in their head. Because if it wasn't set in their head, they wouldn't even think about using that terminology when they're talking about somebody else. If the thing that they think about saying is nigger or wop or beaner to describe a person, if that's the first thing that pops in their head, they grew up with that drilled in their head. And they see nothing wrong with it. Because I grew up with my mom calling black people porch monkeys and freaking niggers. And let me tell you something. I would not describe a black person that way. Never would have. And most definitely wouldn't have after the DNA test came back and showed I was 1/16 black. I'm not even a Latino. Italian maybe, but not Latino. And I can understand what beaner is. And I'd never describe somebody from the Latino group as a beaner. or an Oriental person as a wop. It had never come to my mind. In fact, it takes me sometimes a little while to think of what words some of you people use. Because it's ridiculous. And an officer who uses that language is in his mind from childhood. There's something wrong with him. You get him the fuck out of the force. He doesn't belong there. Because he cannot work with the public in an unbiased way. He don't belong there. You officers are just as much human as anybody else. And if one officer puts at risk the workings of the force because of their bias and bigotry, you need to get them out. And then you need to get out there and start to get to know the community you are supposed to be policing. And starting to get to know the constitutional law you are supposed to be enforcing. And making sure you're doing things right. If your precinct won't send you to de-escalation classes to get a deeper understanding of how to do it, then you need to stand up and be a man or a woman and go find a place where you can get that education yourself. Go to school and take some psychology classes, for God's sakes. How can you police somebody when you can't even bother to get to know them people and what they're going through? And you citizens, you need to start stepping up and talking to these officers. You need to find out what they're going through, how they feel, because they're human too. Go for a ride along. See what they have to deal with on a day-to-day basis. And you officers can help with that. Start bringing your cameras along and start doing your own day-to-day basis vlogs and shit. So people can see what you deal with every day. Because neither side of your sides can understand anything from each other if you're not willing to get to know each other and try to understand things from each other's point of view. And those of you out there rioting, how do you think Blake is feeling about that sitting there in his hospital bed? How do you think he's feeling that you're out there rioting and police officers are throwing canisters of tear gas into the middle of you guys and it might end up hurting somebody? You're out there burning places and whatnot, and you might end up getting shot. How do you think Blake feels about that? You think you're honoring him? You think you're getting justice for him? No, you're being a bunch of 2-year-old children out in the freaking middle of the playground fighting over the damn jungle gym. You officers think you're going to be making it better and stopping the rioting by standing up on some kind of armored vehicle, shooting tear gas out in the crowd? No, you're not. You're not going to stop shit. Get up there, get the blowhorn out, and say, hey, guys, I understand how you feel. I understand you're angry at the situation. And I don't blame you. We're angry too. It should have never happened. But we need your help to figure out how it's never going to happen again. And the violence you guys are doing out here is not going to help us figure this out. We've got a quandary here. We can't have a society without law enforcement And we can't have a law enforcement that is not going to properly and fairly enforce the law. So do we want to get together and figure this out? Or do we just want to keep on lobbing firecrackers and gas canisters at each other? Come lunchtime, you officers need to stop sitting in your damn precinct with your sack lunch and whatever you pulled out of your damn refrigerator. Get out there and go to your local cafe and sit down with the citizens. And not sit there across from each other going, oh yeah, you remember this? Do. The way we as citizens always see you doing. You make yourself unapproachable. You do it all the time. And then you wonder why us citizens see you the way we do. Because we don't know you. And you wonder why you do what you do to the citizens. Because you don't bother to get to know them. You go into that local lunchroom, you sit down, you have your lunch, you look around, you see the citizens, and you turn around to some woman or man or couple over there and you go, hey, how's it going? What's the weather like? How you feeling about this weather today? Hey, what's, going on in your neighborhood? And you get to know them. And you citizens go up there and you get to know the officers. You say, hey, what's up? How's it going today? Hey, do you ever do ride-alongs so that we can see what you do as an officer? And you show them you're genuinely concerned and interested in what they're doing. When an officer knows who you are, then when he comes into the middle of the situation, like he did with Blake, they know what kind of morality, personality, fiber you have. And if they know your type of fiber is the type of fiber that doesn't want to create problems for others, guess what? They're more than likely to stop and think about what they're doing. If you stop and start talking to these officers like they're your buddy, so that they can get to know you, like you want to be friends with them, then they get to understand who you are. And when they come up to a situation that you're involved with, they're more able to fairly judge what is going on. And you officers who are out there and doing your job, who aren't a bunch of bigots, when you stop people, officers who do have biased ideologies, you're making your precinct better. When you stop and get to know your people in your community, you make it easier on you. Because you're able to judge better what is going on. If all you want to do is act like Mr. Big, High and Mighty God, sitting in your car driving around, let's just take the police these little people, because I'm the big one. Oh, so Joe over here, who gives a fuck? He calls black people niggers. I mean, I don't think the same way. But apparently you must if you're willing to allow it. Stop them. Stop their bias. Stop your bullshit. You got a partner sitting over there calling black people niggers. You need to report that kind of attitude to the precinct. And you need to keep a close eye on that motherfucker. Keep a damn ass close eye on him. Because if he's got that mindset can mean trouble for a black person. And you need to make sure that you're ready to step in anytime you have to. If that means you gotta pull a gun on your fellow officer, do it. Because after all, when it comes right down to it, your fellow officer is just another citizen in society. And every citizen needs to know that they are going to be protected from a bad citizen. There's a difference between a good officer, a bad officer, and a worse officer. The worst officer is the one willing to go out there and pull shit like what happened to George Floyd. A bad officer are the officers who stood there and let it happen and didn't stop it. A good officer stops it. A good officer bothers to get to know the laws they are supposed to be enforcing. In and out. But they have a right to do what they don't have a right to do. A bad officer walks up there as if he's God and does whatever the hell he wants to because he thinks he knows. A worse officer walks up there and acts like he's God and does whatever the hell he wants to because he knows better, but he thinks that he's better than the law. Some of us citizens out here know the difference because we've dealt with worse officers, bad officers, and good officers. Start bothering to be able to get to know your communities that you are to be policing. Make sure that you clearly know the laws you are supposed to be enforcing. And stop stopping people just because their skin color is one way. Ask yourself when you see a black person behind the wheel of a real fancy car. Are you wanting to stop them because it's a black person and you think that car's stolen? Or are you wanting to stop them because you called up dispatch, you've given a complete description of the car, you've given the license plate of the car, you've got a report back, and there is no report of that car being stolen, and you get a report back saying it belongs to a black person, and you drive along. And when you see a white person in a car that nice, you treat them the same way. You make sure you call dispatch. You get a description of that car. You make sure that the license plate fits and that it has not been reported as stolen. You don't assume one thing or another simply because of the color of somebody's skin. Person's skin color isn't what makes them able to follow the law or not. It's a person's mental attitude that does. And you know what happens if you keep on accusing people of being thieves and drug addicts? And they feel like they got no hope of getting out of that stereotype you put on them? Guess what? They become thieves and drug addicts. Why not? You think they are anyways? If you got to think because of somebody's color of skin that they're a thief and a drug addict without stopping and thinking that they're a human being, you don't belong on the force. You don't belong having that badge. You don't belong anywhere near a community that may have people of that color. Or work in the South Pole or something, where you know every single freaking person that you're going to work with is the color you want them to be. Okay? But don't be surprised if most of what you're going to be doing is watching the polar bears. Can't have a society without law enforcement. And we can't have a law enforcement that is not going to do the best they can for the citizens of the community. So, what is our quandary now? What are we left with? The only thing that we can do right now is live with law enforcement that are killing indiscriminately, killing our citizens, some of them. Some of them biasedly killing our citizens. And hope to God someday it's not us. Or we can demand, as they're doing, to defund the police chance, which does not mean they want to do away with the police department. We can demand that the police department and their unions are reworked. We can demand that the police are held to the same standard that they want the citizens held to, and more, because they are supposed to know the law. We can demand that the officers that police the citizens know the law. We can demand better training for the officers and better de-escalating training for the officers. We can demand better schooling before a person becomes an officer. We can demand that the police union does not stop a crooked officer from getting fired. We can demand that any officer that does get fired loses their pension. And if an officer gets arrested for wrongdoing, they lose their pension. Period. Just like any other employee in any other business. We can demand that for every police force there is out there, there should be a collaborative citizen enforcement board, review board, that is made up of citizens, and not all just white citizens on one side, who are allowed to see untouched video recordings. And in fact, that there is a central hub that every officer's personal cam and every police car cam, that the footage from those cams are automatically uploaded to the Citizen Review Board. And on that Citizen Review Board, not only do we have citizens of all stripes and colors, black, white, Latino, Oriental, LGBTQ, straight, Christian, Muslim, well, I don't care. You got citizens of every stripe in there. That represents the community. But yeah, you have a representative there for the law enforcement, and you have one for the city. But you never, ever put the law enforcement and the city's representative in with the citizens in the committee, because you don't want them intimidating the citizens. And you rotate out the citizens on a regular basis. If you take one black citizen out, you bring another black citizen in. You don't make them all Republican, you don't make them all Democrat. And maybe even include in a couple of 17-year-olds. Because, I mean, in a year, they're going to be adults. And you choose them the same way you choose anybody for a jury. It becomes a citizen's obligation. Just the same as jury duty. Maybe then we can start getting cops that pay more closer attention to what they're doing policing. And we can get citizens who can come out and calm the society when something goes wrong. So that the citizens within the community know they got somebody in there that's got their back. That it's not going to be the good old boy club. We need to make it so that if an officer gets fired from this precinct for doing something wrong, that thing that they did wrong follows them to every job they ever apply for. That it is not hidden in any way, shape, or form. If it was bad enough to get that officer fired, then it's bad enough to get it so it follows them on every application they ever put out to get rehired. And as long as he is not working on the force because he was fired, he has no pension. None. It's our money paying for that pension. We shouldn't have to be paying for bad officers who got took off of the force for bad behavior or who are sitting in prison for illegal behavior. We should not have to be paying that. And it needs to stop. So yeah, people are out there hollering, defund the police. Biggest thing is ask yourself, how's Blake feeling about these riots that come up when it gets dark out? And what are these riots doing other than drawing attention to the violence, not to the injustice? It's drawing attention to the violence of the citizens, not to the injustice of the officers who committed the crime against Blake. And it was a crime. They didn't bother to stop and ask questions and figure out what was going on in the first place. All they did was automatically walk into the situation and assume something. And Blake didn't even have a weapon. So he really wasn't a threat, now was he? You come up on a situation as an officer and you take a look and look at what's going on, and there is no obvious threat, then start. And the first thing you're supposed to do is start asking questions. Not start laying people down on the ground to arrest them. Not giving a crap who's innocent in the situation and who's guilty. Especially if the people happen to be black. You officers out there who shot that man know damn well. You know damn well, and I've seen it myself. You know damn well that if it was a white bunch of people out there, you would have walked up and figured out what the situation was at first. And I've seen it where an officer with a bunch of white people dealing with the same thing, and one of the white people might even have a rifle in their hand. And the officer will walk up and have a conversation with them first. But when it's a bunch of black people, the first thing you're doing is you're up there and you're hollering, "Get on the ground! Put your hand, let me see your hands, let me see your hands, get on the ground!" And you wonder why the hell the black community don't like you freaking assholes. 'Cause you're assholes! Start getting to know the people in your community. Start questioning officers who are willing to use disparaging language to describe anybody of any group. Whether it be black, white, Oriental, purple, green, disabled, LGBTQ. If they're out there calling a LGBTQ person a fag, question who they are. They're calling a disabled person retarded, question who they are. A black man, they call him a nigger, question who they are. They call a Latino person a beater, question who they are. They call a Oriental person a what, question who they are. Because they got something bad stuck in their head. And you keep an eye on that, officer. Because you keep on letting this crap go on, and you keep on letting yourself get swept up in it, it's going to be your ass next. Just like in society, if you hear of a crime that's going to happen, you keep an eye on the group that is said to be going to be doing it. You don't go out there and arrest them if the information is just hearsay. You keep an eye on them. Well, the same thing you do with an officer who has questionable behavior when it comes to groups of different color, race, sex, or whatever. You keep an eye on them. And you're willing to take action when needed. You want to be able to police your community, then you get to know your community. And those of you in the community, you want your officers to be able to treat you more fairly, you get to know your officers. If you don't know each other, how can you treat each other fairly? It's no different than if you're sitting in your house and some strange person walks into your house and starts looking around. They may not mean any harm. They may be just looking around because they came along with your brother or something and you didn't know it. But it's pretty damn scary when you walk in, you see this dude looking at all your shit. Holy shit, what the fuck is he doing in here? Well, that's exactly what you're doing out there in society, comparing to police and the citizens. The police officer is that friend of your brother's who walked in and is now looking around and is feeling uncomfortable and scared. The citizens is the sister who walks in and sees this dude looking around her house, and she's confused and she's scared. Next thing you know, the sister is hollering at the dude to get the fuck out of her house because she's scared, and the dude is pushing back at her, trying to say that he's with her brother. And you got a whole big old fight in the middle of the room. And then you got the mother coming in, taking one side or another. And you got the father coming in, taking one side or the other. So during the daytime, the mother's in there taking the innocent person's side and sitting there saying, but honey, he was in here with your brother. And on the other side, you got the father at night going, no, that little boy had to get out of here. He had no business in here. That's exactly what you people are doing. And then you got the guy in the middle who all he did was walk into the room, lobbing shit at everybody. Because the guy in the middle didn't know the people that he was walking into. The sister and the brother, or the sister and the mother and the father didn't know the guy that walked in, and you got a shit show. So get to knowing each other. Stop the shit show. Have enough freaking guts to be able to go and get to know the people out there. If you're going to police them, you need to know them. If you can't know them, if you don't want to bother to get to know them, What the hell you doing with the badge on? You don't got no business. Ain't got no business whatsoever. And if you can't not bother to get to know the laws you are enforcing, you ain't got no business enforcing them. You don't belong having that damn ass badge on. You need to take it off your fucking shirt, throw it down on the desk and say, officer, and say, chief, I'm done with it. I'm too damn stupid to bother to get to know the laws, and I'm too damn heartless to bother to get to know the people. Plain and simple. You don't like my attitude? Get to know me then.